Good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are, family, friends, peeps, anyone else who's watching this. Today, I am going to probably talk to you about the most important thing that I probably should have touched base on a long time ago. And I think just because I was trying to keep up with everything that's been going on in the West, which is a bit crazy, um, I, I didn't go over this. So I want to bring you two stories today. Um, And I'm going to say that this is perhaps the genesis of transgenderism in children and how we became to be transitioning children and in the West. And let me just say what that is, and what it looks like. Um, what that is medicalizing kids that say that they were born in the wrong body without question, affirming it, and therefore after that trying to stop puberty so that they don't develop to look more masculine or feminine, and giving the children cross-sex hormones, for males estrogen, and also castration drugs which they give to prisoners in jail, which none of these drugs have been proven for this purpose, which can lead to micro penises growing in boys. These are irreversible as well, the cross-sex hormones. But I just wanted to paint a picture of what this actually is. It can also, underdevelopment of the sexual reproductive organs, sterilization, um, also complications, other complications, with bone density, and just general growth. Obviously, puberty is not meant to be stopped. With the cross-sex hormones as well, there's irreversible damages. So women can get their voice deepens, their jaws and their bone structure changes as well, hair growing in new places, and many other things. I mean, I can put a list of everything, of all of the side effects and the damages that are done and have been caused, and the list is endless on every scale. So that's the beginning. So the next stage, what they have been doing for a long time now, is also cutting off, doing double mastectomies, which is cutting off healthy breasts from children as young as 13. Yeah, because they think they're born in the wrong body. And what we've also been seeing is a massive wave of people detransitioning, regretting what they've been doing, and being pushed under the rug. That statistic is not being represented. Neither is this story that I'm about to tell you now. So this is not an old story, and everything I'm about to tell you is, it's as far as all the facts are out there. It has not been challenged, and everything is, a lot of things are video verbatim from people's mouth. You can see the person saying this their own words. So it's like personal testimony and scientific factual evidence written in books and documented over time. So this story is not hidden, and it has not been contested at all. If it has been, please let me know. But no one's contesting that this story exists and it's real. But it's being suppressed. And why this is so important is the basis. So we wonder, where did this whole idea of gender come from? How did it become intrinsically leaked and a blood vein of public institutions and Western society now? So we're talking from the World Health Organization, and being written into the Gender Equality Act, that there are multiple genders. So then from that point on, basically, all governments and the rest of it, all institutions have adopted this practice. But what I'm going to show you now is this practice is based on 100% a lie. It's false. It was a failed experiment that, and then people have known this for a long time, that we're basing this continued experiments on children, to be done on children, whilst we know that it's based on a lie. This is not truth. I'm not going to go further into that argument or discussion right now, but we're going to go into the story. So basically, there's three parts to this. There is Dr. John Money is a major part of this, and we're going to go into David Reimer and how this happened. So Dr. John Money is the psychologist who coined the term gender roles, and he is the one who wrote gender theory. And a lot of the language that's been used in Western society right now comes from this. It's directly linked and been brought back. But we're going back from the 50s and 60s, 70s when he was doing these studies. And so his manifesto, just one person wrote this thing, his ideas, not scientifically proven, and this has been the basis for medicalization of children and all of these things that we're doing right now today, written into the laws that are protecting transgender and other genders as identities as a real thing. I want to go to the history of Dr. John Money, because that's also really important to know who this man was, the purpose behind this, how did this happen, and what it was based on, and just how terrible that was as well. And later on we're going to get to some other things. All right, let's do this. I was actually going to tell the story myself, but like I said, I can talk a lot. So, and I've watched hours and hours of documentaries and interviews and read so much literature about this. And by no means I'm not a medical professional. I'm not an intellectual. I'm not an academic. I'm none of these things. I'm a human being with a cognitive functioning brain. This video is for people with functioning brains. Cognitive functioning brains. You can be doing anything in life. If your brain works and you can think for yourself, this information matters, and it's going to mean something to you because it's going to make sense. And you're going to be like, what the hell? When I say this is the biggest medical scandal of all time, I think I understated actually what this is. This is way bigger than that. This is an atrocity against children. This is more than laziness on an international level, even a cover-up, because it's been out there for such a long time and we're still doing this stuff, which we know has no benefit, if not causes more harm than good. So, all right, I'm going to stop talking and let's watch what I think are the shortest condensed videos that will give you the most information. And then I'm going to add a little bit if I think some stuff is missing. Bear with me, but please watch this. This is like so important, so important. Anyone can understand this. All right.
This video is about David Reimer, who was a Canadian man born biologically male but reassigned as a girl and raised female following medical advice and intervention from his doctor after his penis was accidentally destroyed during a botched circumcision in infancy. So David Reimer was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He was originally named Bruce, and his identical twin brother, who was named Brian. At the age of 6 months, the concern was raised by his parents about how both of them urinated. The boys were diagnosed with phimosis. They were referred for circumcision at the age of 7 months, and on April 27, 1966, a urologist performed the operation using an unconventional method of cauterization, which is the burning of a part of a body to remove or close off part of it. However, the procedure did not go as the doctors had planned, and Bruce's penis was burned beyond surgical repair. The doctors chose not to operate on Brian, whose phimosis soon cleared up without surgical intervention. Dr. Money was a psychologist, and he was a prominent proponent of the theory of gender neutrality, that is, gender identity developed primarily as a result of social learning from early childhood, and then it could be changed with the appropriate behavioral interventions. You've got to remember that this was the time of Skinner, and behaviorism was held to the highest esteem in psychological and academic circles. Money had been working on a theory that any boy could be raised as a girl. He believed that nurture was more important than nature when it came to gender roles. The Reimer twins provided money with a perfect sample. 2 twin boys, one believing they were a girl, raised by the same people in the same way. This allowed money to experiment on Bruce while using his twin brother, Brian, as a control. Money and his team persuaded the baby's parents that sex reassignment surgery would be in Reimer's best interests. At the age of 22 months, Bruce underwent a bilateral orchidectomy, which is an operation where his testes were surgically removed and a rudimentary vulva was fashioned. Bruce was reassigned to be raised as a female and given the name Brenda. Psychological support for the reassignment of surgery was provided by John Money, who continued to see the Reimer family annually for about a decade for consultations and to assess the outcome. Pretty much he was gathering data, using these 2 kids and their family as participants in his study. His reassignment was considered a valid test of the social learning concept of gender identity for 2 primary reasons. First, made an ideal control because the brothers shared the same genes, family environment, and womb. So that covers the basis of both nature and nurture. Secondly, this was reputed to be the first reassignment and reconstruction performed on a male infant who had no abnormality or prenatal or early postnatal sexual differentiation. So, was it an interesting study? Yes. Was it unethical? Absolutely. Reimer said that Dr. Money forced the twins to rehearse sexual acts involving thrusting movements, with David playing the bottom role. Reimer said that as a child he had to get down on all fours with his brother Brian up behind his butt with his crotch against his buttocks. Reimer said that Dr. Money forced David in another sexual position to have his legs spread with Brian on top. Reimer said that Dr. Money also forced the children to take their clothes off and engage in genital inspections. On at least one occasion, Reimer said that Dr. Money took a photograph of the 2 children doing these activities, while Dr. Money's rationale for these various treatments was his belief that childhood sexual rehearsal play was important for a healthy adult gender identity. For several years after the surgery, Dr. Money reported on Reimer's progress as the John Joan case, and he bragged that the child's behavior was so clearly that of an active little girl and so different from the boyish ways of a twin brother, that the surgery and the following behavioral therapy must have been a success. Notes by a former student at Money's lab stated that during the follow-up visits, which occurred only once a year, Reimer's parents routinely lied to the lab staff about the success of the procedure, and the twin brother, Brian, later developed schizophrenia. Reimer had experienced the visits to the clinic in Baltimore as traumatic rather than therapeutic. When Money started pressuring the family to bring him in for surgery during which a vagina would be constructed, the family discontinued the follow-up visits. And from 22 months into his teenage years, Reimer urinated through a hole that surgeons had placed in the abdomen. Estrogen was given during adolescence to induce breast development. A book was written about Reimer's case by John Colapinto, and it's called As Nature Made Him, the Boy Who Was Raised as a Girl. And in that book, which I do recommend you to read if you find the story interesting, Colapinto described how, contrary to Money's reports, when living as Brenda, Reimer did not identify as a girl. In fact, he was ostracized and bullied by his peers, and neither the dresses which he was forced to wear nor female hormones made him feel female. By the age of 13, Reimer was experiencing suicidal depression, and he told his parents he would take his own life if they made him see Money again. On March 14th, 1980, when he was 14 years old, Reimer's parents told him the truth about his gender reassignment, following advice from Reimer's endocrinologist and psychiatrist. At 14, after having been informed of his past by his father, Reimer decided to assume a male gender identity.
It's very important here to emphasize that this doctor literally made 2 brothers do sexual acts together, gay acts, in the name of his proof of his science. literally mentally traumatized both of them, made this boy grow up thinking that he's a girl. I mean, in that he internally knew he was always a boy. You know, you couldn't fool him. He knew something was wrong. Made the whole family lie and everyone else around them lie and pretend that he was a girl. I mean, the ramifications of this are just, you'll see. It's
identity, calling himself David, and by 1987 Reimer had undergone treatment to reverse the reassignment, including testosterone injections, a double mastectomy, and 2 phalloplasty operations. On September 22, 1990, he married Jane Fontaine and became a stepfather to her 3 children. In addition to his difficult lifelong relationship with his parents, Reimer had to deal with unemployment and the death of his brother Brian, who overdosed on antidepressants in 2002. On May 2004, his wife Jane told him she wanted to separate, and on the morning of May 4th, 2004, Reimer drove to a grocery store's parking lot and took his own life by shooting himself in the head with a sawed-off shotgun. He was 38 years old. And that is the end of this video.
okay. That's David Reimer. So earlier I forgot to add in when I was saying about the medicalization and sterilization of our children. I forgot to also add that from as young as 15 years old, they've been performing vaginoplasties and phalloplasties, which is the reconstruction for the vagina to become a false penis of sorts, and for the penis to be removed and be made into a neo and false vagina. And there's many complications that have come with that. There has not really been any moderate of success. There's been multiple surgeries that have to be done for all the mistakes or the thing that went wrong, because clearly this is not based on, it's not based on science. And that's the thing, this is not evidence based at all. Whereas any medical practice, when you're going to be doing surgery on children and they don't have informed consent, because there is no informed consent, and children cannot consent to this, and that's been another big argument in this whole story. And where that came from as well, we're going to get to, because it's all linked into this. But I just had to add that in there because it's detrimental to know that there's children, because they said that they feel like they're born in the wrong body, have now having their penises removed and made into fake vaginas, not having any sexual function, reproductive function, sometimes no ability to have any feeling down there. Like, a child doesn't know any of those things because they're far from it, you know. It just kills me. Anyway, let's get to the next video. Famous family met him. So there's a little bit of crossover in story, but there's more important details in this about John Money that was not spoken about in the previous story.
Be on there. And you have to know also that John Money was an extremely pompous, self-assured individual. He was sophisticated. When he talked, you listened. He came across as being definitive, being, calling the shots, knowing what was going on, knowing the research, knowing the truth. And he in this interview on television said that a boy can be raised as a girl and a girl can be raised as a boy if it's caught, if it's done early enough. And that early enough means before the age of 2.5 or 3. And the parents, the Reimer parents, immediately took note of that, and they thought, here's the answer. This is the answer for Bruce. This is what we're supposed to do. So they contacted Dr. Money, down in Baltimore, and they made an appointment and took the twins down to Baltimore and went down there. Again, you have to understand that this was a uneducated, young blue-collar family. And when they were interviewed later about their meetings with John Money, they described him as like, we just thought he was God. Mm-hmm. We just thought, he's a professor and he's, got all the diplomas and he's the head of this, this entire
new
clinic. At an outstanding university, one of the major universities in the world.
That was at Johns Hopkins, right?
Yes,
yeah, right.
Yes. So you have to imagine this young couple coming and they're at a loss and they are looking for an answer. They've been praying. They're looking for an answer to their prayers. What are we going to do with Bruce? And John Money says, well, we have an answer for you because male and female is actually not related to chromosomes. It's not related to hormones. It's not innate. We can take little Bruce and we have to do some surgery on Bruce. We have to castrate him and we'll remove his testicles. He already didn't have a penis. We're going to remove his testicles. We're going to fashion, some sort of, elementary sort of female genitalia. You're going to give him a girl's name and you're going to put him in pink dresses and give him dolls and raise him as a girl. And you are never, ever, Dr. Money told the parents, never to tell him that this was truly what happened after he was born. Never tell him because that will ruin everything. And it's up to you. You have to just work your hardest to raise him as a girl and make sure that everyone around him is considering him a girl because essentially he is a girl. And so not only was this the answer to the Reimers' prayers, this was, as you can understand now, the answer to Dr. Money's prayers.
Right. He had an experiment.
This was the experiment. This was his proof of concept. His concept was that being male and female is completely separate from biology. It's imposed by society. It's a social construct. And this was his proof.
So I'm sure everyone, or most, at least in the West, you've been hearing today, gender is a social construct. This is new. I've not ever considered that before. But this is what they've been taught in universities. This is what is the basis for medical science in the via government and public hospitals, institutions, schools. This is being taught as fact. This is where it comes from, and it's not fact at all.
Of concept, and so. The Reimers went home. Well, he had his surgery. They took him home. They named Bruce Brenda. They put him in all the girls' clothing and they gave him dolls and they did all the things. And he peed sitting down sometimes because, as we'll learn later, he actually preferred urinating standing up, which is astonishing. We learned later that he always wanted to urinate standing up. And from the time he was in diapers, I think, he was told he was a girl. So that really is fascinating. But anyway, so they took him home, raised him as a girl, and Dr. Money started to follow the twins. Every year, they would come down for a visit. The parents would spend time speaking to Dr. Money, and then the money, there's a slip.
Freudian slip for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dr. Money would take the twins without the parents into his office and spend time with the twins. So this went on for years. And Dr. Money began to report on his study that became a famous landmark study. And he called them, he called her Joan in his study. He was beginning to write about this and lecture. And he was claiming that Joan, AKA Brenda, AKA Bruce, was doing great. I mean, she was adjusting. She may be a bit of a tomboy. He would acknowledge that, but in every way, you know, she was adjusting and she was doing well with friends and with schools, and she liked playing with dolls, and she would mimic her mom. And he was giving this glowing report from year to year, and in his professional writing of his studies, his report, and he was giving talks, and he was getting, you might imagine, tremendous attention for this. I mean, you have to understand, this was by now maybe, the early 60s. This is feminism, okay? This is the sexual revolution. This is a time when society, or at least part of society, wanted nothing more to say that male and female is a social construct. And that in order to gain, full equality, women have to be considered the same as men. And, to have a study such as this study of John Money's, in which he was reporting that this baby who was XY, normal chromosomes, normal everything biologically, but is being successfully raised as a girl because he has a girl's name and girls and dresses and dolls and all, his entire society, his teachers and his grandparents and everyone is reinforcing the idea that he's a delicate girl who likes to cook and, is going to grow up to have babies. I mean, this was huge. Now, what happened is that this theory of John Money's was accepted over the decades. We didn't find out what really happened with the twins until decades later. And in the meantime, during those decades, his theory became doctrine. Okay, his theory became just baked into, so many fields of both soft and hard science, so that it was standard that whenever you had, for example, an XY or any child that had ambiguous genitalia, if they could be raised as a girl, they'd be raised as a girl. So they'd be castrated just automatically. Why? Because of the great success, because of what John Money proved to us. And so lots and lots of boys all over the world. I mean, this was written into the textbooks of endocrinology and the textbooks of genetics. I mean, this became truth, so to speak. Not that there weren't people, other scientists that were standing up and saying, John, this isn't proven yet. Let's look a little closer. This is not necessarily the case. But what did he do? He wouldn't tolerate that. John Money, was a tyrant. He would not tolerate another psychologist or biologist or geneticist standing up and trying to publish something that would challenge his great gender theory. He would arrange, he would intimidate the editors at the scientific journals to not publish those articles. It's a lot of what's actually going on right now is very similar.
Right.
So,
To that, I would like to say exactly. I think the reason David Reimer was on Oprah in 2000, a public story. There's been books about it. There's been so many things. It's been public knowledge internationally. If it's on the internet, it's true, right? But it's been there. And it's not being picked up as a story. Nothing's been changed in the medical field at all. And people like this doctor and both of these doctors, Dr. Peterson, Dr. Grossman. Sorry if I butchered that. I will. I want to put the links of everybody that's on here. I've actually watched so many of her talks, interviews, literature. So the thing that's happening today is people are being silenced. But the worst part about this is, back then, we're talking about 50s and 60s, there was not the internet. There wasn't this global network of people who knew. Then 2000, okay, internet wasn't that big and that, okay, that's fine. And things have been suppressed, but the information is there and is out there enough for multiple sources of people to know. And this cancel culture is what is slowing down the change. But the purpose of this video is to give you this information before I give you what is the biggest key to helping all of this, which is the WPATH files which have been released, which just exposes that literally that these bodies have known that what they're doing, they don't know what they're doing, they know they're causing harm, and they're still doing it. Okay.
So, so what happened with the twins is that after decades, in fact, John Money wrote a book in 1997 in which he said yet again that his twin study, that his gender theory had been confirmed and supported by the results of this experiment with the twins. And the following
one person experiment, by the way, a one person experiment.
Yeah, but even that one person, it didn't work. Okay, so
a complete fallacy, a complete lie. The premise of gender study and gender theory is being put into medical institutions in the West now is based solely on a complete lie. Something that did not work at all. And it was the basis of continuing it.
So in 1998, what do we call him now? Not Brenda, not Bruce, but what happened is that we discovered that he stood up and he said he just blew the cover of this whole thing was a hoax. And his name was now David. Brenda had become David. And he was not only a man, but he was married to a woman with, and he had adopted 3 stepchildren, and he worked as a janitor in a slaughterhouse.
Right.
So that was David Reimer, and people can go onto YouTube and hear him being interviewed about his experience of what it was like to be told for 14 years of his life that he's a girl, and to never, ever, ever feel that was his truth. And what happened is that during all those years, he was not happy with his dresses and with his dolls. He wanted to go play with his brother's toys. He wanted to pee standing up. He wanted to, he was rough. He was so boyish and aggressive that kids called him cave woman. Okay, they made fun of him because the way that he walked and his gestures and his interests were all so masculine. And he was a miserable child, and the family was miserable. And on top of everything, when the family was going back for those yearly visits to Johns Hopkins with Dr. Money was sexually abusing those twins.
Okay, how?
He was forcing them to undress and to mimic sexual intercourse. And he would say, this is how this is what men and women do together, and he would, humiliate them and show them pictures. And the point came, why did they stop going down to Johns Hopkins? The boys refused to go. They refused to go back to see Dr. Money, and the parents couldn't understand why.
David Reimer committed suicide eventually, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the denouement of that particularly tragic case.
And his twin.
So not only was this a failure, it was and go ahead.
Oh no, it was a disaster, terrible disaster. He committed suicide, and his twin brother died of an opiate overdose before him. His twin died first. The entire family was, what kind of words? Traumatized. It's not enough. Trauma is not enough to describe what that family went through.
My parents didn't know a lot that was going on. And if they would have known, it never would have happened. By me not saying anything, the medical community was under the impression that my case was a success story. And I was shocked when I heard that people thought that my case was a success story.
So what we should point out here is that this experiment couldn't possibly have gone more cataclysmically wrong than it did. Right? Not only was what Money was saying was not true in the technical scientific sense, it was an anti-truth, and he falsified the data, and it culminated in the death of two people, the demolition of a family, and the perversion of an entire culture. That's John Money's legacy. And
he never.
Okay. What Dr. Jordan Peterson just said there, I've been trying to say, but I don't have the articulation that he does to put it into those words. So maybe I'm going to rewind that again so people can hear exactly what happened.
True in the technical scientific sense, it was an anti-truth, and he falsified the data, and it culminated in the death of two people, the demolition of a family, and the perversion of an entire culture. That's John.
If that is the model that we're basing all of this on, then it makes sense to see why the world's so messed up right now. He sold the lie that it had the opposite results, but we're getting the results that we have today because this is based on a lie. This information is so pertinent. I can't stress enough just to understand this one thing, because from this point on, everything that we're talking about with gender that's been put into legislation and law is based on this. Okay, I've got one more small video about John Money, and that will be it for today. Thank you for your time, guys. Dr. Miriam Grossman, and yeah, please listen to this.
So you mentioned John Money. Of course, this goes back to John Money. John Money introduced the idea of gender identity. He coined the term gender identity, and he said that the gender identity is completely separate from biology, and that it is something, it is one's identity as male or female, because back then, of course, we didn't have the non-binary and, in between all that, 47 different genders stuff. So in the 50s, when John Money was writing and speaking about all this, we had male and female. And his theory was that male and female is something that is foisted on a baby, a child, by society, and that it is unrelated to biology. He further said that men and women, males and females, have biological distinctions, but they are limited to menstruating, gestating, and lactating. And that was it. Aside from...
This is very important because especially for people working in the medical profession, if you're in Australia or any of the Western countries right now, you'll know that all of these words and terms have been introduced to why I started the channel of What is a Woman, because being a woman is now categorized by this man's ideology, not by biology, not by any back science, not by anything evidence-based, by one man's pursuit. And here we are.
Those three things, everything else in terms of personality and preferences for activities or, cognitive abilities, emotional styles, perceptions, that is all, it's a social construct, okay? It's all put on the child in the first 2.5 to 3 years of life. And then John Money said it's fixed. So, when you put the pink blanket on the little girl and the blue blanket on the boy, and then you give them the toys and you give them, you have certain expectations based on whether it's a boy or a girl. And all those things, the frilly dresses and the 50s was a time, of course, of stereotypes. So he spoke about it in terms of, the girl's going to be in the kitchen making cookies and the boy's going to be out, fixing the car with his dad. And he said, if you take a girl, with ambiguous, okay, I'm sorry. Let me go back a minute. John Money's specialty, his interest was in hermaphrodites. Okay. Very rare babies that are born with ambiguous genitalia. And those ambiguous genitalia are due to some congenital issue, either endocrinological or due to chromosomal abnormality. And the baby is born, they take a look at the genitals, it's just not clear what's going on. And that's where the term comes from. This is important. Assigned sex at birth. Assigned. Because in those cases, and these were the cases that John Money became an expert in.
Okay, so for those of you not familiar with that term, if you are in the West right now, this is a very common thing. The argument for transgenderism is that and this whole idea of having cis male or cis female is that cis means that you are in line with the gender that you were assigned at birth. This is new terminology, and the assigned at birth, so trans people do not align with the gender they were assigned at birth. But this was reserved specifically for intersex people with ambiguous genitalia or a chromosomal abnormality. So for them for trans movement to take this medical disorder and put it for their psychological disorder, it is just far-fetched, it's improper, it's rude. There's so many things I could say, but let's move on.
And he opened up a center specifically having to do with, his PhD that he wrote in the 50s was on the issue of sex assignment of hermaphrodites. What do you do? It's a crisis. You have to say we had a girl or we had a boy. And so what do you do in those cases? And he had a special interest in this. Now, you and I know that when someone has a certain interest in their life that consumes them to the point that they're writing their PhD about it, they're studying it, they make it their career, there's usually a reason behind it. And it's worthwhile exploring that reason. Now, when you look at John Money, and his early life, and he wrote about this, he was very open about it. He grew up under the hand of an abusive, alcoholic, out of control father who would beat him and his mother. So John Money, as a child, was not only beaten, but watched his mother being beaten. He no doubt had a terrible childhood, and that influenced his image of masculinity was this monstrous individual. And he wrote later on, he grew up on a farm, by the way, and he wrote later on in one of his books that he realized that the world might be better off if not only animals, but men were gelded at birth, castrated. Okay, so gelded is the word,
It makes you think about what's happening right now. The thoughts on the founder of gender publicly publicized that he thought it may be a good idea if the world's males born were castrated from birth.
Used for animals. So he said that the world might be a better place if men were gelded. And he also wrote, he said, I wear the vile mark of male sexuality. In other words, we would call that gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about his own body, and he's saying...
that's verbatim. So if you don't know what gender dysphoria is, basically what we were calling trans people before, and they were happy with this term and this terminology, is somebody who has an uncomfortability with uncomfortable, whatever that word is. Okay, I'm trying to stuff my mouth with too much right now. If you are uncomfortable in the body that you have and you really feel no affinity attachment, such a dislike that it does not match who you feel inside. Now, they call this gender dysphoria. If it's for the opposite sex, if you feel so masculine and that this feminine body that you have does not match, you feel so uncomfortable in it, they call this gender dysphoria. And there are ways to go through and tackle this. One thing I'd like to mention in this is that as the studies, and if you were to look into things as things have been shown up until now, anybody with real gender dysphoria that has had has either started early in life or even later in life, but has been in this for a few years and gone through their own stories, there is a high link to sexual abuse, and there's other things from child trauma that have created this space and ideology, a form of therapy for this person, or an attraction for this thought and or this gender, or the cause of the gender dysphoria to begin with. And you say the thing is, there's body dysmorphia as well, which they say like bodybuilders or anorexics. It's this really the distortion of what their body looks like and how they see it and for what it is. So up until I don't know when, it's been understood by everybody, or most trans people, that they have gender dysmorphia, and they know that they are not a female and they're not a male. But this gender theory goes around that to allow anybody who has thoughts that don't align with their body and they feel the opposite sex. I don't know how you can feel the opposite sex. It's impossible, because every female I know, we all feel differently. The only thing that makes us female is our biology. Yeah, and how this is being integrated into society, well, I'm showing you now. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry.
That his genitals were vile to him. That is gender dysphoria. We didn't call it then. We didn't have a name for it back then. So clearly, John Money was uncomfortable, to say the very least, with his own masculinity and his own body. So it's not a surprise that he would come up with a theory that, if true, would comfort him on some level, that he is not going to become his father. He's not his father. Even though he shares the same type of physical reality, his body, his genitals are of a man. But if his theory is true, and there's such a thing as gender, which is completely separate than biology, then it gave John Money like a way out of not identifying with a monster.
Okay, guys, well, I'm actually going to leave it there for today. I feel it's just important for you to get those facts. I don't need to talk anymore, because I won't stop. And I hope I haven't wasted your time, and you can find some value in the information that I'm sharing with you today. If not, okay, I haven't wasted my time anyway, because this needs to be out there. And I just wish you well. Love you all. Take care. Stay safe. Love each other. Stay sane. All right. Bye.